Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode where I am redesigning Oasis Springs into a Greek paradise. After my last build, I'd done a house and I thought, you know what, let's put somewhere that we can go visit. So in the end, I chose on a generic lot because they didn't quite have anything which I thought maybe I would want. So I've gone with destroying the park. Please don't kill me. I know lots of people like going to the park, or I like going to the park in Oasis Springs, to be fair. But it was the perfect spot to use the tools for the levels for the first time, and also it was just the perfect location. At the moment, I'm working on sorting out the colours because obviously it had all of the paints, terrain paints, which have been used on the previous lot, and I'm terrible at them, but it turns out okay. So to start with, I'm trying to remember what an Acropolis looks like, not because I don't know what they look like, but I went to visit one, 4 or 5 years ago, with my now husband in Rhodes. We went to what is it called? Wasn't Sadari? No, that's wrong. Island. We went to Lindos. Oh, absolutely love Lindos. Definitely recommend it as a place to go visit. And the way Lindos works is you've got this little bay with water. You've got sort of between this little ravine, you've got all the houses and the bars and everything, and up on the giant hill is the Acropolis looking over everything. So I wanted to have that hill look, but not make it look completely ridiculous based on the rest of the area. And one of the things I distinctly remember is when I was walking around, so you had these walls around the edge of it, so you could look down, and my husband, who's scared of heights, was like, yeah, that's about as far as I want to get to the edge. But there you go. And then, so that's what I've started with. I started with this sort of wall around it. And then I had a mind freeze, no idea what I'm doing. And I'm thinking, I can't entirely remember what an Acropolis looks like. I should probably look, because all I could remember was this giant wall. So I threw in, obviously, some of the ruins. Generally, you'll find Acropolises are ruined. And looked back, as you can see, and thought, no, this is wrong. There's something wrong with this, and I couldn't figure out what on earth was wrong with it. So I had a quick look up online and readjusted my landscaping so you could have an actual Acropolis structure. So often it is rectangular or square. You've got all these columns, and obviously in the past they would have had the roofs on top of them. So the other thing which you'll find in an awful lot of them is that they have steps pretty much the entire way around. So I decided to lift up the foundations of it. So put a foundations in, lift it up so I could then put in those steps around the edge. Now, having only a few of the packs, I don't have all of the game packs, all of the stuff packs. It can sometimes be quite difficult to sort this out. But thanks to, Get Together, definitely Get Together, I had to think about that for a second. You've got all of these ruins for the ruins that you get in Windenburg, and they work perfectly. Bit fiddly, bit of a faff, but I was able to get that look whereby it was crumbling. I could build them on top of each other, build them into each other with move objects, and be able to make it look like it was a crumbling sort of structure on top. Eventually, you'll see that I make all of this and I make it look I think it's quite good, and then I decide that actually, looking at them, the pillars are much, much taller, and it was not as commanding over the landscape as I wanted. So I decided to actually raise the wall height there by increasing the height of the pillars, and at which point this is what I realised, that I'm going to have to lift everything up. And I did debate it. Was it worth it? Am I really going to be bothered? And then I looked at it and thought, yeah, I should, because it looks so much better. And, because there's nothing worse than having moved something into the right position and then having to remove everything. Which is made worse because I then have a look at the picture again, and often you can see the cornicing, because it's still got enough of a structure so that you can have cornicing, but because of the size of the squares you have to have in The Sims, you end up with it being much bigger than the actual brickwork. So these ruins, for example, what I'm talking about. And it just, yeah, I then have to make them thicker and wider. The end product looks great, but it was a bit of a faffy thing to do at times. So here's where I'm looking to put those steps which I was talking to you about around the edge of the building. So often if you go to an Akropolis nowadays, you'll actually see that they're crumbling. You know, you don't want to tread on every single step that's going. But I also wanted to put some steps up for, you know, visitors. If people are going to be visiting, they're probably going to want to be able to walk up and not have to walk up the steepness of it. To be honest, I could have tried to build something with walls and made that look interesting, but they're so angular that I don't think they really work for ruins as such. It's just a shame you can't get some of the things which you can find in the ruins in the actual world of Windenburg. One of the things I really liked the idea of is turning this into one of those lots where they have surprise parties, but you can't do those. Those physically do not exist, and actually if you go into them, which I'd never done before in build mode, I was able to see that actually the bit which was editable had nothing to do with the bit which would have the party sort of appeared and disappeared. So I had to destroy that idea, which made me sad. Yes, I also then realised that when I put this wall up and made it one size, it was rather fatter than I wanted, and also it pushed out my already moved pieces of ruins. So in the end I decided it was worth it, and then I had to figure out how to delete it. So I know how to delete the floor, but unfortunately you couldn't delete enough of the floor to be able to keep the cornicing, so I have to build an internal bit so I could delete it, and then I have to build up around these 1 square thick areas. But I do get internal cornicing, which does help in a minute. And obviously first thing is move everything that it has just moved, that I've already placed 3 times now. So this is count number 3. And then I have to figure out how I'm going to fill in those gaps. So one of the things I thought is about actually just increasing the size, as you can see, but it just looked so weird. So this was my way of trying to make my life easier, and it was rubbish. I hated it. It just looked absolute crap. So one of the things I did instead is actually I took the pieces I already had for the stonework, and I just reused them again and again, and I placed them over each other, in each other, so that they looked different and so that it covered enough that actually it looked like it was supposed to be there. All in all, I spent more time moving bits of stonework around than anything else in this entire build. Eventually, you know, I'll put a few things downstairs, I'll put some seating area, I even put somewhere for people to eat, because I thought that would be quite useful. If you're going to go look at Akropolis, normally you have to walk quite a lot and you get hungry, and you can eat down the bottom, but why shouldn't you be able to eat under the magnificence of the Akropolis as your background? That was my thought process anyway. Also, because there's a lot of exploring you can do in this area, I thought actually that would still be quite good. Otherwise, people are going to get super hungry, and my Sims will complain when I play in it. So, trying to kill lots of birds with 1 stone as much as possible. So here you can see me. I don't want all of them to have that sort of edge where the stones have obviously broken off, so I'm joining them up so they actually look like one big thick wall with just that one edge which is broken off. it's quite easy to do, and actually if you look at it, the stonework, a lot of it matches up really well. You can sort of place them next to each other and you can find where the stones would sort of naturally join, so it still looks quite good. The only thing I do have an issue with is obviously if you have a look at that screen, you can see where I've placed them on top of each other, which isn't perfect, but it works for what I want it for. This is where I realised I really wanted to put in those stone benches. The nice thing about the stone benches is they look like you're just sitting on the wall, which is quite standard. And then I had this idea that actually why can't they sit in the wall? So actually it would physically look like there's this giant wall, this stone structure, and the Sims are going to do exactly what humans do naturally, which is, oh, that's flat and my bum can perch on it. I'm going to sit on it. So one of the fun things for people who decide to play this is going to be, where are the seats? And, oh, I can sit on the wall. The other thing I found with this for the first time, because I've never used the terrain tool to change, obviously, the height and all of that, is that some areas I end up with slightly floating objects. Not something I particularly wanted, so I did have to make adjustments, try and figure out where I needed to sort things out, make changes, move them down, etc., etc. So we're actually getting fairly close to the end of this, and I sort of finish it off with looking through to have artifacts in there. You know, quite often you'll find a bit more in a museum, but you'll find that there's artifacts which are there. It's more about looking at the structure itself. And I did think about putting this urn on, but it didn't look correct enough. It looked a bit too fancy, so I decided against it, got rid of that, and had a look, put some landscaping in, so some trees, so it looked a bit less barren. Looked like actually it was meant to be there rather than currently, which is just, oh look, there's a big stone thing in the middle and that's it. So a little bit of greenery I thought would add a bit more interest, maybe just look a little bit nicer. And then I wanted to actually add it so that you have the areas where they used to walk. So a lot of it will be laid to stone, and I couldn't really decide what I wanted because the stonework which you have as your terrain paints look a bit too new and fresh, and the one I picked actually, whilst it did go with the get together pack, had bits of grass in, and you just wouldn't see that. It's not very Greek at all because you don't get often these big areas of grass or grass tufts growing up all that much. So I covered it with the same colours which I actually used to try and make it look more in keeping in general. So you still have the stonework, but it's got this light covering of sand over it, which I think looks a bit more realistic. So now we're getting to the final little bit. I was thinking about maybe putting something for the kids there, seeing whether there's anything else which was quite in keeping. Realised I probably needed a bin for all the rubbish. It's all well and good giving people food, but they have nowhere to put it, then they're, not going to do anything. And then the final thing is, when I used to look up at the Akropolis when we went on holiday to Lindos in Greece, in Rhodes, it was always lit up so nicely at night, and I wanted to have that effect on it. And so I started with the spotlights underneath the pillars, but they just didn't give enough light. Whereas these lights, they get hidden for the most part, and they give a lot more light out. So this way I was able to take away those really rubbishy spotlights. I do use them for something else eventually, but it meant that it lit up so nicely. And then my next thought was, hang on a minute, it's only lighting down the pillars because obviously the light is going down, which means the top, which would have been the roof, has no light whatsoever, which is hence why I wanted the spotlights in the front. So putting the spotlights in here, it just gives it that nice look, which at night, so that it's all lit up. So that is the Akropolis. Like I said, it's meant to be built in the park area. That's where it's designed for anyway. If you have liked this build, you can see more of them on my YouTube channel. You can also watch me on Twitch at Tails53, and you can also download this from the gallery. Thank you very much, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye!